Hello, it's Angela with the Mount Airy Public Library. Tonight we have a new story from storyteller Brack Llewellyn, and the title of this one, and I wasn't familiar with this one. This is a new one for me. It's called The Three Feathers. All right, we're going to let Brack tell us this story.
All right, everyone, gather round, come in close. Remember to use both ears to listen and turn on the old imagination so that these words I'm sending out to you can form pictures in that wonderful mind of yours. As Angela said, this is not one of the better known Grimm's fairy tales. It is actually fairly obscure, but it's a good one, and I think you'll like it. There's a couple of things I learned when I read this story for the first time, and I will talk about that when we finish up. It's called The Three Feathers. It takes place in an ancient kingdom where a king had three sons, and the king had a problem. He was trying to decide which of his three sons would follow him to the throne as king. Well, there was an older son and a middle son and a younger son, and they were all pretty much the same, except the younger son just didn't seem to be quite as smart as the others. Now, he was clever and he was fun and people liked him a lot, but he just didn't seem to be king-like to a lot of people. His name was Simpleton. The king decided to have a contest to decide which of his sons would follow him to the throne. So he gave his sons a quest. He said, I want you to go out and I want you to bring me back the most magnificent blanket you can find, one that will fit beautifully on the royal bed. It must be worthy of a king. Now, to give his sons some direction, he took three feathers, like the ones you see behind me here, and he threw them up into the wind. One feather flew east, one feather flew west, and the third feather just kind of fell to the ground. Well, the two older sons, laughing at their younger brother, took to the east and took to the west in search of this blanket. Simpleton, the youngest son, simply sat down next to where his feather was, wondering how this was going to help him with the quest. And that's when he noticed that nearby to where the feather had landed, there was like a wooden door. But it wasn't just lying on the ground, it was actually an opening into the ground. Simpleton brushed off the dirt and he opened up this wooden door and he looked down into this dark cavern beneath. And curiosity getting the better of him, he made his way down into this cavern where he found a great toad, a big toad frog, and lots of little smaller toads running about as well. And it turned out that this great toad was a magic one and spoke to Simpleton and asked him why he'd come down into their domain. Simpleton told the toad about his quest, and the toad said, I think I can help you. And he called for the other toads to bring him the box. And the other smaller toads brought this great wooden box, all locked up. They unlocked it and opened it. The great toad hopped inside and looked about and came out, sure enough, with the most magnificent blanket you've ever seen of golden material, suitable for a king. He gave it to Simpleton, and Simpleton went back up to the surface and went to present the blanket to his father, the king. Now, the other two brothers, they'd simply gone off and gotten pieces of cloth from the village, thinking that would be sufficient. But no, it did not compare to this wonderful blanket that the youngest brother had found. The king was pleased. He said, well, this is proof. Simpleton should follow me to the throne. But the two older brothers were, no. We must have another contest. This isn't fair. Give us something more difficult. So the king thought about it, and he said, all right, I want you all to go out and bring me the most magnificent ring you can find, finer than anything I wear on either hand, worthy of a king. And once again, the king cast three feathers into the air. One flew east, one flew west, and the third feather, as you might have guessed, just sort of circled down to the ground. The brothers took off in different directions, but Simpleton knew what he had to do. He knew that feather was leading him back underground through the wooden door, and he went back down to speak to the toad again. And he told the old toad about the next quest. The old toad thought for a moment and said, I think I can help you. Bring the box once again. So the other toads brought the box, opened it up. The older toad hopped inside. He was gone for a minute or so. And he came back with a magnificent ring, just the king's size, fit with beautiful jewels and stones. He gave it to Simpleton, who was very pleased. He thanked the great toad, and he went back to the surface to present this ring to his father. And the king was very impressed. The other two brothers simply bought simple rings that they found out in the villages, but they could not compare to this magnificent ring that Simpleton had found. And the king said, well, that settles it. Simpleton follows me to the throne. The other two brothers protested again. No, 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 no. One more quest. One more quest. Whoever solves this quest ascends to the throne. Very well, said the king. And he thought for a moment. He said, here, every king needs a queen. Whichever one of you follows me to the throne will need to marry. So, I want you to go out and find the perfect princess to become the queen someday, who will marry you and be worthy of the throne. And one more time, the king threw 3 feathers into the air. As you know, one went east, one went west, and Simpleton's feather once again just sort of circled and landed near that wooden door. The older brothers scattered out into the villages looking for this girl. Simpleton went back to the toad, thinking this time, I don't think what I need is going to be in this box that belongs to the toad. But this time, the great toad did not call for the box. He called for a small wagon, and he told one of his other toads to hop into the wagon, and then handed the handle of the wagon to Simpleton and said, there you are. Simpleton said, I am much obliged for what you've done for me, but this is not a princess. This is not a future queen. Ah, said the toad, don't judge things by the way they look, especially in the dark. By the time you receive your father, your quest will be successful. So Simpleton took up the wagon with the toad in it, went back to the surface, and slowly walked back to his father's throne room thinking, oh, this will never work. When he arrived, his 2 brothers had returned with 2 girls from the villages. And they were fair enough and seemed like wonderful girls, but they simply weren't princesses. Simpleton, ready to be laughed at by his brothers and probably by his father, turned to the wagon he'd brought up, but instead of the toad sitting in the wagon, there sat the most beautiful girl he'd ever seen. The toad had transformed, and she was perfect. She was going to be a perfect princess and a perfect queen. All in the presence were awestruck by her. And the king said, well, I believe that settles it. 3 challenges are enough. Simpleton shall ascend to the throne, and this young woman shall be his wife and his princess, and someday his queen. And sure enough, that is what happened. Now, what did I learn from reading this kind of unknown fairy tale? Well, 2 things, actually. First of all, as the old toad said, never judge a person or any creature by the way they look. That's not truly who they are. And magic can exist in the most unusual places. And no matter where your feather lands, you can usually find a little bit of magic. Thank you. You have been an outstanding audience.